Hello and welcome to the first episode of Press F to Discuss. I'm Jared,
And I'm Matthew.
and we're here for our first inaugural episode about talking about video games.
Playing games and then discussing them.
Yeah, all sorts of video games, old and new, whatever.
So today we're going to be talking about Dishonored. Dishonored is the 2012 stealth action adventure game developed by Arcane, published by Bethesda. Pretty well regarded. I mean, I think it's one of the highest rated titles on Steam.
Wait, really?
If I remember
It's
correctly.
not that good.
Well, no, it's like up there with like One Finger Death Punch and then like Dishonored.
Wait, One Finger Death Punch is also one of the highest rated?
Yes, like the highest quantity or the highest percentage of positive to negative.
That's weird.
Yeah. But anyway, so Jared, what do you think of Dishonored?
I like Dishonored a lot. For mostly mechanical reasons. I am a sucker for stealth games, and in general, I think not enough games let you not murder people. Um, so I appreciate Dishonored as a game that does that. And I also am a sucker for like weird world buildy stuff, which I think that Dishonored does kind of well. Well enough.
Yeah. I mean, I think it definitely is a unique steampunk. It's like Victorian era, like kind of England.
Yeah, it goes to the wall with its setting.
Right. And there are like whale gods and stuff.
Yeah, there's like a.
I think the steampunk aspect of it is probably what's like most identifiable. I think it's steampunk, right?
It's steampunk, but it's like weird steampunk.
It's like steampunk, but also magic assassins exist in this universe.
Yeah, there's like whale bone talismans, but also like they use whale oil.
Yeah, it's like they're simultaneously a very scientific and a very sort of spiritual almost side to the game.
It's a cool vibe.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's one of the most identifiable things about Dishonored, besides the fact that the character models all have really big hands.
Do they?
Yeah,
Yes,
they
they
do.
do.
It's like they really do have a large hand. So I mean, I agree. I think it's a solid game. It's particularly mechanically speaking. I think the level design, in particular, is
Yeah,
just
that's something that's always
superb.
worth talking about with stealth games.
Yeah, well, especially with stealth games. But I mean, having recently played through the original Deus Ex, I know, like 20 years after the fact, I saw a lot of like kind of similar threads there of having multiple routes to get to an objective, which you could do like any and all of them, as well as like you said, Jared, like pacifist versus antagonistic sort of methods of takedown.
Not the most elaborate choice system.
Right.
But yeah, the verticality of the level design is something
Yes. There's something really neat about like scaling the pipes of Dunwall and like crawling over rooftops and stuff, entering vents, becoming a mouse or a rat. I think just generally speaking, the game feels really nice, and it's kind of hard to describe, but everything like about like the gun feels weighty, the crossbow feels like a crossbow, the melee combat, if you're misfortunate enough to, or misfortunate enough to find yourself in hand-to-hand combat with the enemies, has a really nice
good.
Yeah, it has a really nice like rhythm to it. The platforming, you can like get to the point where you feel really like smooth, and you can I mean there's some incredible videos on like YouTube of people chaining together absurd like powers and assassinations
Right.
So I think there's a lot of like the breadth of approaches that you can take sort of is enhanced by the fact that they're all really nice feeling. It's not, I mean, again, to actually reference Deus Ex, it's not like Deus Ex where like stealth can be really tricky to do, or like a non-lethal can be really hard to do. Like everything feels like a very viable option.
Right.
And not just a viable option, but like a fun option. It's not something you feel is a big chore.
Yeah, so let's dig into that a bit, because I think that's the first thing that comes to people's mind when they talk about Dishonored, and then we can get into the story stuff later. But just like stealth games are at a rarity today. Like there's stuff that has like stealth elements, right?
Right.
Like there's
GTA 5.
yeah, GTA 5. We have a GTA 5 episode coming. It's one of
It's
our
gonna
early
be fun.
ones. Yeah, it'll be great. Uh,
No, yeah, but I mean, I think there's actually been a little bit of like an indie resurgence. I'm thinking like Mark of the Ninja, Volume.
I don't know what
Um,
volume is, but
that's by the guy that did Thomas Was Long.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, now I know.
Volume, Marvelous Mistakes. I know there's some, and then there's also been like Thief got rebooted, and it wasn't really that well
Apparently
received.
not that well,
Yeah,
but
I,
yeah,
I think part of the issue is the fact that we're sort of almost moving away from stealth games because I think partially because of like the push towards open world and like less contained games.
well, it happens that stealth is like a thing that is just thrown in. Like, take something like, I don't know, like and insert Bethesda game here that's not Dishonored.
It's not just
Like Fallout or Skyrim. There is stealth, right? Like, there's a sneaking skill in Skyrim, and there's sneaking skills in the Fallout game. Well, Fallout New Vegas was.
yeah, or like Far Cry. Far Cry has some stealth elements in
Well,
3.
Far Cry is kind of functional in terms of stealth, but
Yeah, but I think I don't know if I'm understanding what you're saying. It's kind of like I don't. It's never the main focus of or it's
right.
not as frequently the main focus of the gameplay loop anymore.
Right, like with Fallout and Skyrim, or like hell, the Uncharted series ostensibly has stealth stuff, but what that amounts to is crouch and walk slowly.
Right.
And I don't think that's what stealth games are about.
Yeah.
Really.
I think Deus Ex and Dishonored, at least in terms of sort of first person stealth designs, kind of illustrate what's the best about stealth games, which is like we said that that swath of opportunities.
They're like puzzles.
Right. It's a puzzle where there's not just one right answer, but also
It allows you to combine variables in such a way
combine
that makes
variables
you
and then
feel
also like respond dynamically to your situations that you find yourself mixing and matching setups. And I think as opposed to like we were saying like GTA where you'll just have like one or two missions where it's like all right press the right stick in and like now you're crouch walking, hit this enemy and then
yeah,
like
walk up behind this person, hit them.
right, as opposed to this sort of broader philosophy with the game design of having that breadth of options.
Right, yeah. And like that's what makes Dishonored good. Like there's a bunch of toys you can use that all do crazy different shit. Like it's so like take one of the game's like main centerpieces, the light wall, which is like you come across a bunch of different times in a bunch of different places and you get to it and you're like, "Okay, how do I deal with this obstacle?" And like your answer could be climb over it. Or it could be like find the whale oil powering it and remove it. Or like I remember one of my fonder memories from playing the game through the first time was in the mission where you have to assassinate the evil dude who's not the final evil dude, but you think
One of the
he's
bald guys.
yeah, one of the bald guys, and you're like in his castle, and there's a light wall, and I didn't know how to get around it, and I couldn't find the whale oil. So what I ended up doing was possessing one of the guards who could walk through it, and then walking him through it, and taking him to a closet, and then choking him out. And that was like I felt smart doing that.
Right. Yeah, I think there is something interesting to be said though about the fact that it's like there's a game theory term, but I can't remember it. Where basically like, sometimes people will choose, or most frequently people will choose the simplest option, and that is something that I found myself deviating towards. And I don't know if that's just because like that's the type of player that I am, that I avoid as much conflict as possible in stealth games particularly. But I found myself like in these situations, I would just always go high, and like invariably you could sort of get over things that way. I don't know if that is necessarily like the flexibility actually coming back to bite it a little bit, where it's like it doesn't become a puzzle as much as like a basic loop that this is how you circumvent it.
Well, the problem is just that I think if you want it, like it does 3D design better than most. It's,
Yes.
It's good, but it's not perfect. Like once you're like when you go up a level, you need to find something else interesting.
Mm.
Where most of the time in this game, it's like you go up and now there's no guards, so you can just walk past
Right.
everything.
Yeah, I mean, and I think I don't know what I think.
You don't know what you think.
Yeah, no, I just lost my train of thought. Um, yeah, like I said, that might be just sort of how I play the game, where I tend to be not a very experimental gamer, at least not when I think there's like enough stake that I'm like, oh, I don't want to reload this mission or whatever. Um, so maybe that's just me sort of playing the safe route. But the fact that one can do that, and then one also could, like Jared, like possess a guard, one,
Yeah,
choke him out in the closet. I do think even if it can be sort of even if it starts to show that there's like a simple trick to get past it, I think it's not definitely not limited to that.
yeah, and it's like it starts simple and then gets more complicated over
Sure.
time. Like you end up with scenarios. Oh, you have this room full of guards, so you can't just like
Right.
walk through it. So it's
Yeah, and that's also I'm unfortunately probably not able to like remember the times where I was not able to just go up. But the one thing, they are sticking
yeah.
out to me.
Even in the buildings, like you can just jump onto lamps and then
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Lamp hopping is like the most viable strategy in Dishonored.
yeah. So
Um,
Scott,
so which actually I kind of dovetails into. I did think the game was a little too easy. Admittedly, I did play it on normal and I did play low chaos, which results in
yeah,
basically
the default choice.
less aggressive AI and also less populated AI or enemies.
Which I think
Um,
is kind of unfortunate.
yeah, which actually maybe we can talk a little bit now about
Yeah,
the way that chaos is implemented in the game.
yeah.
So
So, for everyone who's not aware, because this is the first episode of the
I
podcast,
just played Dishonored like how many months ago? What, like two, right?
yeah,
So
yeah. Well, I revisited it a bit, but like I have a grudge against binary moral systems, and this dates all the way back to Mass Effect, which I felt significantly pigeonholed a lot of the time. Um, but I don't think they're a good storytelling tool. Yahtzee Croshaw has a good sentiment about that. You know, the guy who does
that's
a
zero
failure
punctuation error.
punctuation,
Yeah.
where he's like, with binary moral systems, you're not making a series of choices. You're making one choice over and
Mm.
over and over again. So
Mm.
like, there is no incentive in the game to like, okay, so you're gonna go low chaos. So there's no incentive to not just keep going low chaos forever.
Right.
Like there's no middle ground. It's of course not to mention low chaos is good and high chaos is bad, but just like it's simplistic and it's not really
Mm.
interesting. And the ways that it is like it comes across are like a little strange.
It comes across very mathematically, I guess, but very yeah. I guess mathematically is because what it is I'm trying to remember. It's like if
If you
you kill more than 20% of people in one level, you get a high chaos ending for that level. And then overall, if you kill more than 50% of like the people you come across, you are irreversibly given the high chaos ending. And basically, like you can kind of like accumulate by, if you kill like 25% of the people on every level, you're going to eventually accumulate the high chaos. Or if you just kill a ton of people early on, you'll get to a point like around the halfway point where there's nothing you can do about it to get it back. But I think not only is the fact that it's tied to a very specific number sort of interest or a very specific percentage sort of an interesting, I think, limiting choice, but I think it's also the fact that the game doesn't, at least as far as I'm aware, doesn't differentiate between like the targets, the people that you're like supposed to assassinate or otherwise
yeah
dispose of,
handle
um, random civilians, enemies, or actually, yeah, or enemies, and then enemies themselves are split up into um, the soldiers or the weepers, and I think that again, where like the weepers are categorized just sort of blankly as the aggressive enemy, it doesn't really fit with the morality of what the game was kind of trying to sell us on, which is this idea that like, well, at first off, there's like something as like a moral killing, right? Where it's like this is your duty,
Right.
or at least this is like what you need to do to be to the safest. Um, and then there are people like that are just like, oh well, I could just kill all of these weepers, and it's like the same thing if I had killed all these guards. But theoretically, at least in universe, they're in very different moral baskets, so to speak. Whereas like one is instituting a military regime dedicated to protecting like class warfare in the form of like not helping the poor and only helping the rich, and then the other people are just like, well, like the poor people that
Right.
just got stuck with the
Well,
plague.
let's dig into that like less abstractly and more mechanically.
Okay.
So the thing with every target is that there's a choice, right, to just straight up kill them, but there's always a non-lethal option. And the theoretically interesting thing about this is that the non-lethal option is often worse than the lethal option.
Yeah. As far as in the story,
Yeah.
in the story, I thought you were talking about like when you just like choke out and everything.
No,
But
no.
yeah. In the story, like what? There's
There's the two.
the twins.
There's the twins that you can get their tongues cut out and sell them into slavery forever.
Like the slavery, I think that they themselves were
So it's
leading.
poetic or whatever, but still pretty
Poetic,
fucked up.
messed up justice.
Yeah.
There's the Boyle lady who
you sell
basically
into
you
slavery,
sell
basically.
into, I think, like
Sex slavery.
sex slavery, like into a guy that like really likes her and she clearly does not like him.
Yeah, she's gonna be kidnapped forever.
Right.
And then there's like the guy who you brand, he's cast out by the church and,
Right.
and stuff like that. And that's theoretically interesting because it implies that like, oh, like maybe it's not as easy as kill equals good, not kill equals bad. But
or vice versa.
yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, right. So maybe it was.
Yeah, but the point being like that's not reflected in any way in anything else.
Right.
You basically
Besides
have a-
adding to the tally, it's so maybe you did like if you did sell the twins into slavery, like it doesn't really matter. Even if you kill the twins, as long as you just don't kill anybody else. That
Well, but
doesn't
the
really
important
matter,
thing
too.
is people still look at you like you're a good guy
Right.
after you. It's because it's the low chaos thing to do.
Hmm.
Like, like the story does not reflect how fucked up these things are.
Yeah, despite the fact that like the scripted event makes it very clear that you're not supposed to feel good about this, and I didn't. I think I opted not to kill Lady Boyle, because I was under the wrong impression that the guy that I was handing her over to, she had feelings for him, and it, like when I found out like this was not going to be a consensual like married relationship like you would hope it would be, I was like, oh my god, this is like, I want to take it back. I think I actually like went down the sewers and tried to like find them and stop them, and I couldn't. But the problem is after that moment, like it didn't really matter.
Right. This is the problem with like binary moral stuff, right?
Right.
Like when you pigeonhole things, it reduces the impact of your choices.
Right.
So like say like you want low chaos, like that choice of like, oh man, do I do this terrible thing to this woman or do I do nothing is no longer a choice.
Mm.
It's just a which path am I following? So it's like shooting yourself in the foot. Like you take this potentially like interesting dilemma and boil it down to good or bad.
Mm.
And that's a problem. Like
Yeah, it sucks because like the game does a good job of instilling a sense of stakes, and at least if you do go over the top and kill everybody, like the game, I think actually maybe even a little too hard, makes it clear like, well, there are going to be consequences to this. Like there are going to be more rats because there are more corpses. The guards are going to be more aggressive because there's like so much murder.
I do find it funny that you're contributing to like the death toll of a country so
Yeah.
significantly that
Yeah.
more rats appear. But
I mean, yeah, it's one-man biological warfare.
yeah.
Yeah. But the problem is that on the flip side, not only the flip side, but sort of like the default flip side, where like kind of got to go out of your way to kill that many people. It's like nothing really changes.
Right, yeah. It's
And the game makes a little bit of a reference to that when it's like I think Samuel at one point after the twist is like, like you're a good man because like you show restraint or something like that.
Well, there's a thing before the last mission, where if you were low chaos, Samuel's like, you're a good man and you'll do the right thing. But if you're high chaos, then he's like I'm not gonna stop you, but I'm gonna sound the alarm. And he like raises a gun, and you can like shoot him to stop, or like you can kill him to stop him from raising the alarm.
Right.
But like
I don't know which is neat on its own. Again, I like the fact that we can act and the character reacts to that. I think it sucks that it's like limited to those kinds of
again, it's
incidents.
binary. It's not it the binary moral system actively inhibits the depth of its characters
Right.
too. So on that note, let's actually talk about the heart, because I think that's
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot all about the heart. Yes.
because so that's this is an interesting device that's used very, very poorly. So for those who
Yeah, I like to carry it around and like try to annoy people at the party. Like,
yeah, you can just point it at people at the party and they don't give a shit.
look at my heart.
But you can, if you like point it at someone and then you use it, it'll tell you something about them, which is theoretically interesting, right? It's always like something dark and mysterious,
Right.
Like you find out their dark secrets or whatever, which is interesting. But there's like 5 of them, so you you can get some stuff about the characters around you, and they're like kind of interesting. Again, the problem being that none of that ever comes up in any meaningful way to you.
Right. It's all very on the surface. I haven't played Watch Dogs, so I probably shouldn't make this like connection, but it reminds me a little bit of like
The profiling thing.
the profiling option in Watch Dogs, where it's like you profile like this person, has like $500 in her bank account, and she's a single mother, and like, all right, like I'll rob her or I won't rob her, and then like that's kind of it.
Yeah,
It's kind of like that, but even I would say less involved because there's no interface between you and them, but besides like you pointing this hard at them and it's saying like he misses his wife or something like that.
yeah, it never really comes up in an interesting way. So it's good, like it's useful for like building depth, but if you don't act on it, it's not that good. But then the bigger problem comes when you use it in a grander setting. So do civilians have a different pool than guards for the heart?
I don't remember. I actually didn't use the heart all that frequently. I mean, basically, I whipped it out to try to grab all the bone charms.
Yeah.
Um,
But the problem is
but I forgot really mostly about it.
the problem with the heart is like, so you point at a guard and you'll get something weirdly poignant like he's planning on killing himself after work today,
Mm.
and it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then you like go around and you can find out like, oh,
It turns out like 4
Yeah,
of these guards.
he had a fight with his family. And you're like, interesting. And then you go to like a 4th guard and you're like, what's up with you? And it's like he's planning on killing himself after work today. And you're like,
Yeah, well, right, and I think that kind of illustrates it's a weird inconsistency kind of in Dishonored where there's it's such a lush world filled with like so many details, so many different ways you can attack a level. Details that even change, like at the very beginning, I think you walk up to dude getting his portrait painted, and like he's sitting next to a bottle of liquor, and if you drink the liquor, you find that portrait later on in a different level, and whether or not you drank the liquor, it'll reflect that in the picture.
right.
And it's like, dang, like that's a lot of care and thought that went into this game, but it's sort of like
It's not enough.
they tapped the bottom of the wells when it came to this like really quickly.
It's not that it's not enough. It's that it's applied in a poor kind of way.
Yeah, applied sort of in a underbaked kind of way, I guess I would say.
Right. Yeah. That's the problem. Like so there's all sorts of like cool incidental stuff that really appeals to me as someone who likes like the idea of really rich mythology storytelling.
Right,
So-
and yeah, and storytelling that exists as a series of atmospheres, almost for lack of a better word, where it's like things happen, you might be there to see them, you might not be there to see them, and like they just sort of contribute to how you understand the world.
Right. Like there's the guy who gives you your powers, the stranger. What is his name?
I think it's the stranger.
whatever. I'm gonna call him the stranger and don't at me. Uh, not that you have my Twitter handle, but if you
Excuse
did,
me,
if
streamer.
you have it, don't at me. Um, but like he's theoretically in because he's like his guiding motivation, as near as you can tell, is that he likes interesting people. Interesting in the sense that like they're uncertain and then they could go one way or the other. Oh no, the outsider. That's his name.
Oh, that's right. It is the outsider.
You lied to me. I thought you
I,
had that.
I, I have no idea, man.
Um, but yeah. So like he's interesting as like an agitator of life, and like you. It lends itself to a lot of speculation because he's almost like Lovecraftian. Like you
Mm,
don't really understand his motivation. It feels like it's beyond you, but nothing ever comes of that.
right.
Or there's like Granny Rags, who like
Best character in the
yeah,
game.
and she's like kind of creepy and shit, and like
There's
you
something about like her husband died,
yeah, her
and you
husband
can like
died, and like
save one of the thugs from her later on in the game.
well, so the
Where
whole thing is it's like a slowly building like tension. So like she seems like a sweet old lady, but then she like asks you to do increasingly dark stuff,
with
or
bone charms littered
yeah,
around her house.
she asks you to poison a vat of stuff,
Yeah, which will
and
kill like innocent people as well as thugs.
yeah, and it like gets creepier and creepier. You can find like interesting incidental details. Like I think in that mission where you go assassinate the head bald guy, uh, you can go down in the torturer's dungeon and you can find a note from Granny Rags to the torturer,
Oh,
like
I did
talking
go
about
down there. I don't remember if I saw that.
talking about like, oh, let's play again or whatever, something creepy. And it's just like building this slowly mounting tension. Like there's this great bit where after you do the thing where after you poison the vat for her, she's like, oh, there's a bone charm upstairs. Why don't you go get it? So you go up to get it. And it's like suspended in the middle of a room, and like you walk up to it, and then you grab it, and then you spin around, and she's right behind you,
Mm.
and like that's interesting. Like I tried to on subsequent playthroughs, I tried to like get it so like she couldn't get behind me,
Mm.
like angle in such a way that she couldn't fit into the geometry, but like she kept like
Right. Well, I
popping up
mean,
anyway.
yeah.
But anyway, the point being like that's interesting. It's like slowly building up to like I don't know, scary old lady or something, and then she is just like a scary witch lady.
Yeah. Well, I think there was a little bit of something. I think actually right after you do the first mission for her, and like while you're on the way to get the bone charm, doesn't the outsider like pop into your vision and like what do you like? Do you know anything about this woman? Like
Yeah,
don't trust her or something
yeah,
like
well,
that.
he talks about how like she's his servant or whatever,
Right.
in as much as he has servants, and that's like theoretically interesting.
Well, yeah, I do think that is interesting because there's that sort of Lovecraftian sense of something so awesome in power that it's completely beyond you. Um,
But you have to do something human with that. Like this is my rule for mythology. Mythology is great. I
Jared's
think
rule for mythology.
okay, my rule, whatever you want to call it. I have strong opinions about mythology used in fiction. Um, uh, there's a few authors I think do it well. Like Neil Gaiman has a really strong like knack for it. Jim Butcher does. I was reading Ancient Magus Bride recently, which also does it well. But the point being, what they do is they take these like big concepts and they find what's human about them.
Mm,
That's what's important. So like you want to talk about something like big and unknowable, like then you I don't know, maybe dig into something about how inconsequential humans are in like a grander uncaring universe.
right.
That's what Lovecraft did. And like but you have to do something with them.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's just window dressing.
Well, and I think that kind of illustrates a little bit of my big issue with Dishonored in general is that it feels like the story just didn't have enough time to ferment as the gameplay did. Um, it felt. I mean, I think a lot of people did complain that it was short. I actually thought it was like a fine length, but um, the story felt very sort of abrupt in its nature. Especially the stuff with the outsider, where it's like, oh, like important things are happening. Like, you're part of this strange magical cult that you have direct contact with one of the most like powerful beings in the universe or whatever. But it just kind of, and he's just kind of like, all right,
Then he's just kind of there, and he like
yeah.
shows up ominously. He's
Yeah,
like,
he shows up every once in a while as like, don't you think
he's
it's weird that you did that thing that you did? And you're like, well, like kind of,
like,
but
what will you choose next? And then he vanishes. And
right,
then,
right. And I think, I mean, they have Dishonored 2 is coming out shortly, and I'm hopeful that they really take time to like dig into that, um, because the game, like, it's clear that they do care about the small sort of incidental things that happen. It's just a matter of then tying that all together into something that you can actually like sort of navigate as this actual relationship or dynamic that exists between you and these gods or these
yeah, it's just
witches or what have you.
it's symptomatic of the larger problems with the game, which is just that you have a lot of cool things that don't do anything.
They don't really, yeah, or they, I mean, they do something. It's just at the end of the day, it's gonna, you know, what this does ultimately. This just, well, it makes more rats.
Yeah,
and
at
then
the end of the
that's
day, it's more go in,
it's
kill
more
this
rats,
guy.
and then Samuel's like annoyed at you.
Samuel, the voice of reason in the Dishonored universe.
Yeah. Um, which I understand. I mean that's like a really tough thing to hit squarely. I do think I don't know, personally I do think like the Dragon Age games do a good job of creating giving you these choices where even if one seems like good or bad, what ultimately happens isn't itself like a judgment call, and I think that sort of contributes to that broader sense of a universe that isn't just functioning on this very clear algorithm, which I like I said, I think that's sort of Dishonored's issue, and it's kind of like, well, you know, you kill enough people, and then boom, you're past the cutoff. Now you're in high chaos, and it's like it's very sort of surface level how it assesses that morality,
Right.
um, which, like I said, kind of runs counter to the best strengths of the game, which are like the amount of depth that goes into the gameplay and level design that you can do all these different approaches, but ultimately you're going to kind of find yourself in the same spot at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, some of it's interesting and like it tries to make you feel the weight of your choices by the way it impacts certain characters.
Mm.
There's basically I have the NPCs in this game grouped into two distinct groups, and that is Emily and Samuel, and then the rest.
The rest of them, yeah.
And like Emily and Samuel are basically your moral barometers for this
Right.
game, and your choices, the impacts of your choices, basically boil down to how they act
Yeah,
based
like
on.
how pretty is the drawing that Emily is drawing? Like how pretty is it? That reflects sort of like your choice. And,
Right.
how grumpy is Samuel with you? That
Yeah.
reflects your choices.
And it's just like, all right.
Yeah, it's a little strange because yeah, I don't know. The result is that you kind of end up with, I think, a lot fewer. I don't know. I don't know if necessarily any of the characters were super well fleshed out to begin with. Um, I mean, there's some really interesting, like I said, because the game, the game developers were so dedicated to like all the tiny little details. Like, there's evidence that suggests like you and the Empress were romantically involved. I mean, there's tons of little notes you can find, and
Right, but it's a matter of capitalizing on that.
right. Well, yeah, and so the end result I feel like is that you got a lot of like neat little details that don't really add up to anything that like weighs.
Well, like
anything.
compared to Matt's gonna kill me for this, but compared to Undertale,
Ooh,
um,
I just haven't played it yet.
Matt's natural inclination is to be as sarcastic as possible about anything he's not participated in.
Basically,
But so one of Undertale's defining strengths is that it has accounted for all the dumbest possible things you can do. Or not the dumbest, but like the nichest. So like every character in that game has like a little arc. Like it accounts for every possible thing you can do. Like there's if you play the game a certain way, during a boss fight, one of the characters will call you and say, "Oh, we should get dinner with the character that's currently trying to kill you. So come meet me later." And what you can do something like you can abandon the boss fight and then like go to where you'd be meeting him for dinner, and he's like, "We can't eat dinner yet. I think she's still trying to kill you." And it's just like the point being, it has things like that, and they all build to like the game's theme, which I won't like give away for spoilers, but like they're there for a reason. They create the sense that the world is lived in and real and consequential. So it's just a matter of like, and I think this is something that video games in general could do more. It's about knowing your storytelling devices, like why the question that I think more people need to ask is why. Like, okay, we're gonna add all these cool incidental things. To what end? Like, what does this do? How does this enhance the story? And if you can't provide a good like a good answer to that, maybe your efforts are better justified elsewhere. And
Right.
again, this is I don't know. We've been beating on it for a while, but I do really like it. Like, I think
Well, yeah, I think the reason we're beating on it is because the idea is this was like for me. This was sort of what pushed it from greatness down to like it's a good game.
yeah, like it is really evocative. Like the world is so weird in a good way.
Mm.
It's fascinating. It just lacks a little oomph or
Yeah.
something. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, yeah. So I don't know. So I guess I am thinking a little bit about I think I took some notes about yeah, about like the fact that the plague is an interesting kind of enemy of its own in that it's basically it's uncaring, it's pretty all powerful and kind of amorphous, and it reminds me a lot of the outsider, just out of control, basically. I don't know. I think sometimes I wonder, like we brought up Undertale, and it's like, well, Undertale asked all those questions and gave you all those opportunities because like that was the point of Undertale was to sort of subvert those
Yeah,
combat
video game
mechanics.
expectations.
Right. So is it expecting too much of Dishonored to be like is this just Dishonored basically playing by the rules that it has to set as a stealth game where you have to incapacitate and or murder people?
I mean, it almost feels like a tribute to Thief in the sense that Thief also had zombies, so Dishonored has to have zombies.
No.
But yeah, like it just
Like, are we trying to apply a morality system that the developers purposefully like didn't want to apply?
right. Like, well, there is some kind of humanizing thing for the Weepers. Like, there's a few places where you can find notes of like
Mm.
what the Weepers were before they turned.
Yeah, yeah. Or you can see
Like, oh, I was
my
caring for
son
mommy.
just started displaying these symptoms, um, or like my girlfriend or whatever.
Right.
Which I think highlights again how weird it is that the game doesn't treat them any different than that. Like you,
Right.
at the
There's
end
a
of the day,
huge.
they're just enemies that'll aggro on you as soon as they see you. And
There's, I. So that's it then, right? Like, the biggest thing to take away is there's a gap. Like, so I don't know what dear listener your opinion is on the phrase ludonarrative dissonance is, but I think it's a useful
this is
phrase.
narrative.
Um, and I think that's kind of the case. Like the story is at odds with the gameplay.
Right.
Like zombies are theoretically like shells of former people that should be reflected in some way, but in reality, you just
Like your best case scenario is just to avoid them. There's no opportunity for a cure.
well, not necessarily a cure, but like a more impactful take than they're just like an obstacle,
Right.
or like, oh, you're supposed to be, you know, understanding that these are people that you could be killing, so you should do something about that. But then
Right.
it doesn't. There's no follow up. So.
Yeah. Which, again, I'm kind of wondering if that's what the developers were intending. Like the idea of being there's a couple of sequences that really are supposed to drive home sort of the hopelessness of the situation. I mean, most sort of garish is maybe like the Boyle Party, where like you come in from like this apocalyptic, plague-ridden wasteland into like this lavish party, or the scenes I think when you're escaping from the assassins' den, and you come across like a woman who's just like this is what Dunwall is now, and she just kind of like looks out over the wasteland, and I'm wondering if that's like if that was the intent. I mean, in good faith or not, to be like this is hopeless. There's no other way for the city or for you to deal with these beings other than as obstacles. Is that giving it too much credit, or
I don't think it is. I think it's trying. I think it suffers from The Last of Us syndrome. Speaking of which, we should talk about The Last of Us
I
at
have to
some
play
point.
The Last of Us.
I own The Last of Us, so you don't have to buy it. Not that you could buy it on
Yeah.
computer. But anyway, um, uh, in that, like they are genuinely trying, but I feel like it's just
To make these empathetic sort of beings.
yeah, but it's just not. I think the video game industry just has not internalized what it means to represent your story through gameplay, and that's the problem. Like,
right, there's no way to interact with the Weepers besides the way the rest of Dishonored interacts with.
There's no
this
way
game.
to really interact with this like complex narrative that the game is setting up. The narrative of the narrative of the narrative, I guess, narrative of the cutscenes, whatever you want to call it, is like a place where no one's happy and capitalism is like
Yeah, the best you can sort of do is use the imbalances and injustices that you can apply to put yourself in a better position.
right, and that's interesting. But then the gameplay is kill or not kill,
Right.
and there's nothing more to it than that.
Yeah, which
Like,
I mean, do you think maybe that's just the developers also like not wanting to judge us?
I don't think
or
so.
You think?
I think it's just like there's a wonderful talk that the developers of Spec Ops, The Line, gave, where they talk about your primary means of interacting with the world in a video game is what drives your story. So you need to make sure that's accurately reflected in the story. So like your primary means of interaction with the world is kill or not kill.
Right.
And that doesn't cross the gap to an enormously complex narrative that
We're talking about Dishonored?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, basically you have the option to kill, incapacitate them, or just ignore them entirely. And at the end of the day, really, they're absolutely inconsequential in their differences, except if you sort of pass that magic line.
Right.
So none of the individual deaths mean anything. It's all just about the sum of its parts, which is sort of limiting because it's hard to apply that kind of morality when you just end up putting everybody in these baskets of like these are enemies. You can kill as many of you want of them as long as you don't go too far.
Right. Yeah.
And something again that the game sort of flirted with handling in I think a more interesting way with those sort of stingers of like, oh, you spared this person, but like this is a lot worse.
Yeah.
But those ultimately themselves were fairly inconsequential as well. But they were a step in the right direction, I think I would say.
Right. It's well intentioned. It just like you need to make that next step.
Right. Which again I think is like you said, Jared, like a limitation sort of the gaming industry right now, where we do have this kind of very sort of tunnel vision approach to like how we can interact. I mean, like basically, if you in video games, like you can like shoot it.
Yeah. I mean, we'll dig into this more in later episodes, I think, where we talk about things that engage with it.
Yeah.
I think
Dishonored definitely, I think, gets closer to breaking out of that mold than I would say a vast majority of the games
right.
that come out today do.
There will probably be a lot of this in our upcoming Grand Theft Auto episode
Yes.
about the nature of like what it means to have violence as your means of interacting with the narrative.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But yeah, like it's something that needs to be considered.
Right. And I think also just kind of illustrated again, like I said, in that I think the story is in some ways sort of ended up playing second fiddle in development to the gameplay development. That's what it seems like to me.
Right, and that's like a recurring thing. It's just something that needs to be tackled. I think.
Yeah. But I mean, overall, it remains a really good game. I would say for sure. Certainly from a mechanical level, and I think there are sort of glimmers of greatness in the story and how it deals with morality. I think unfortunately it wasn't quite able to break out entirely, but it definitely started chipping away at it.
Yeah. So you would recommend this game?
I would recommend it for sure, with a little bit of hesitation, but
yeah, it's not a perfect game. It's a very good game. It's not. Got
certainly if you're looking for like just a fun stealth game, like Dishonored absolutely is a good time.
Right. Yeah, and I would recommend it as well. Like, again, it is. We didn't talk about it as much because we're fucking nerds, but the stealth gameplay is really exemplary. Like, I really enjoy it.
Oh, it's superb.
Like
Yeah.
it's far above average. Like if you enjoy that sort of thing,
Hmm.
I can't recommend it enough. It's got narrative issues, but that doesn't make it bad.
Or not worth playing.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So it's interesting. That's all you can really ask for. Do a little better next time, and who knows?
Yeah,
Dishonored 2.
Dishonored 2 could be really. I think it's clear actually that they're already just sort of a little bit interested in breaking the mold, in that you've got like a playable female character, whereas like before, like there were like three women in the game of any
Yeah.
consequence. It's like the one who is your love interest that gets killed to motivate you, the one who gets kidnapped to motivate you, and then Granny Rags,
Yes.
and then like
I mean,
some
there's
maids and stuff, but
yeah.
like nobody of consequence. But like, so I think it's kind of cool to see that already they're branching out, playing with some different ideas. I'm really hopeful that that translates to some new or more nuanced takes on morality.
I mean, I'm a little concerned just because like of the stuff I've seen thus far, like the trailers and the intro cinematics and stuff. Like this game takes place like 10, 15 years after Dishonored, but it like the dialogue makes it sound like Dishonored happened like 3 days ago,
Mhm.
which doesn't inspire confidence for the writing quality. But
Right.
I'll keep my fingers crossed.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, if not, hopefully at least we'll still get like a game that plays really well, like the first one did.
Yeah, there's a joy in that too. So yeah, I think
I
that
think that about wraps everything up that we had to talk about for this episode.
yeah,
Thank you for tuning in.
we'll be back next week with
Something else. We're not certain yet.
We have a list. We're not really clear yet, but we'll figure it out.
Flying is very much by the seat of our pants.
Yeah. But
All
thanks
right.
for
So
joining us.
I'm Matthew,
I'm Jared.
and this has been Press F to Discuss.